Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to have Andrei Givok with us today to explain what is happening in his life over the last 5 years. So, Andrei, can you please introduce yourself and let's just start from even before 2020, what you were doing in your life with your family. So, welcome to our show.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. And so yes, my name is André Givog.
Okay.
Givog is a soft G as opposed to Guy. And
Okay. Givok, merci
Givog,
pour le
yes,
corriger.
it's French. That's why. And so before, I'm from Ottawa, or just southeast of Ottawa. And what happened is I have a background in martial arts, and at one point I was involved in the film industry and all that, and I wanted to have some stability because I wanted to grow a family. And the movie industry and stunt work, there's not a lot of stability. Once a movie is done, then you proceed to something else. And then I was told by a lot of friends and family that, hey, government is a stable job. And once you're basically in the government, you're set for life essentially. And then you can focus on your family as opposed to try to always find a new contract. So I took that to heart, and I'm like, okay, time to change the chapter in my life and to have a family. And so I had an opportunity to move to Fredericton in order to get my foot in the federal government. And then so I moved to Fredericton in 2018, and that's where I met my wife actually. And so in sorry, it was in 2015, and then we moved back from Ottawa, from Fredericton back to Ottawa in 2018. So originally, when I moved in my mind, I was going to stay there for approximately 8 months to a year. However, I didn't realize that because I figured once I'm inside the government, I can apply to internal jobs, and then I can get a transfer back. However, there was they said once you apply for position, you have to be within 40 kilometers radius, and I didn't know that. So that's why it took a little bit longer, because in order to get a transfer back, they have to people in Ottawa, the employers, they have to hire the process, which is look for somebody a local. If there's nobody, then you can go external. And if nobody external or no time, then you can try to branch out, and then in order to bring somebody back. So that's kind of how it worked. So in 2018, I got the opportunity to move back. But just funny story, just 2 months before I moved back, I had a condo in Ottawa that I was renting out. But just 2 months before, I didn't know I was coming back to Ottawa. I sold it because I'm like, okay, well, I don't see when I'm going to move back. So I'll just sell the condo. And then next thing you know, I had an opportunity to move back to Ottawa. So come back in here. Oh, sorry, you want to add something?
Yeah. So what were you doing at your work? What kind of job and with which department?
Well, so it was in the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and the type of work is account representative. Just to give a little bit more perspective, I have high school diploma is my highest level of education that is recognized in school. I've had in the past a real estate license. I've also had a life insurance license. I have martial arts black belts, but all of those are not really counted for a traditional career in government. And essentially at um, they only look at your level of education, and that one for me is high school diploma. So that basically leaves me a lot of limits in terms of what I can get in terms of position, and there's also a high level of competition. For example, the position that I got in Ottawa for a CR4 position, there's approximately 1,200 applicants at that time for one position, and that the competition was open for 3 hours. Whereas in Fredericton, they were looking to fill in 25 positions, and then they were looking yes, so the position was open for 1 week. They received 75 applicants for 25 position, and then they even extended to 9 days. And then at that point, I was on a casual contract doing pretty much that position. And I had a team. I was a supervisor and I had a team, but on a casual contract basis. So because I had the experience now of that, when I applied for the position, it upped my chances from 1 in 1,200 to 1 in 3, which was a lot more probable for me to get, and that's why I made that move.
So you told me that even well before pandemic, you already made arrangements with your employer to work remotely, and this is why you even were able to buy a house in the suburbs of Ottawa, so that you could live on a countryside and work remotely. Just can
Well,
you tell us more about this part of your
sure.
life?
To expand on that, so when we moved back to Ottawa, we bought a condo in Ottawa in the east of the city, and we were traveling. I was traveling by bus to downtown location at the headquarters, and then after that, so I did that for approximately a year, and then after that, we had moved to Orleans, but really what we wanted is to move closer to my parents because we were planning to have kids, and actually at that time, sorry, I'm getting the timelines a little bit confused, but I think we had a newborn at that point, and we wanted to be closer to my family, to my parents, and so that's why I wanted to get out of the city. And but before that happened, bec I had a promotion, and that's why I moved to Ottawa for that different position. But during year end, in the financial in the finances, there's always a big rush. So I asked my former team that they were looking for help. I said, "Well, I'm still training there. If you want, I can help you guys during the overtime." And so I was able to help my team from Fredericton out of Ottawa office, and I was doing it essentially remotely, but from the Ottawa office. And then after that, they approached me to say, "Hey, would you ever come back?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I wouldn't go back to Fredericton because my family is all over here." But they jokingly said, "Well, you know, the position, we're trying a new pilot program where we're trying to onboard people to telework." Because they wanted to kind of compete with like the Googles at the time and the big corporations, and so they wanted to try the pilot project. So at first I was like, I don't know, because pros and cons, right? I mean, I'd have to take a demotion in order to get my older position back. So career-wise, it's not necessarily the best move to take a demotion. But if you weigh the pros and cons, at that point we were living in Orleans. My wife was pregnant at the time, and I'm like, okay, if I have to go to hospital with her to bring her to the hospital, right now it's about an hour bus, or yeah, a lot of commute time. Whereas if I can travel, work from home, then I can just tell my manager, hey, I gotta go because you know my wife's pregnant. So after a lot of thinking about it, pros and cons, I even went to like a presentation with upper management to discuss the pros and cons of telework. And like for example, another one of the pros or cons, depending on where you stand, is the social part. You know, when you're in the office, you can have the banter or talk a little bit with people and just catch up. Whereas if you work from home, you're isolated from that. So that's something else you have to take in mind if you are to do that, because you don't have that little you know, over coffee kind of interaction kind of thing. So it's something that you have to really think about. And then, yes, so I decided to take the decision to make the move to have a full-time position, telework, and I took the demotion. And that was about a year and a half before COVID ever happened.
Yeah, that's very interesting indeed. Because then I guess you were quite surprised why you working remotely already, teleworking for almost 2 years, why you were forced to vaccinate yourself or disclose your medical status. Can you tell us what was your first reaction? How you reacted to this announcement that everyone, including yourself who work remotely, had to disclose your medical status and do something related to your health or face removal from your position
Yeah.
for a known undisclosed period of time, essentially being cut off all income sources for indefinitely potentially. Uh, can you tell us more about how did you receive this information and what was your initial reaction and what you have done after?
Okay, so yes, I'll go into that. But just first, before I get into that part, I'll explain a little bit more about. So when we used to have a place in Orleans, that was during around the COVID era. That when we had found a location, the real estate market was very very hot at that point, and we needed to put an offer. But we had already sold our house because our realtor at that time said you need to sell the house first because it's no condition offers, and because there's so many competition. Like for example, we put an offer somewhere, there was 22 offers at the same time. So eventually we ended up in Orleans. That's not where we wanted to go, but and then after we got there, within 9 months we moved to this other location, and this was a project house. Again, we're trying to separate ourselves from everybody buying the same thing, and so we got another distressed property where I was okay. get ready to get busy to go to work and renovate. And then during that time, we had our second child, and then so that was in July. And then fast forward over to October, and when my baby was about 4 months roughly, that's when there was a talk about like, okay, the employers are going to mandate people to disclose their vaccination status in order to be able to work to keep their position. And for me, one of the accommodation measures is that in there at that point was to work from home through a telework agreement. Well, I already had a telework agreement working from home because that was my full-time position for about a year and a half already. And so when I saw that, I'm just like, wait a minute, this is really an overreach of government trying to find out my private medical information, especially the fact that I'm already working from home, and basically I'm whether my status is vaccinated or not is irrelevant at this point because we have medical privacy. So it's nobody's business, and that's how I looked at it at the time. It's nobody's business to whether I am or I'm not vaccinated. So when I looked at the document, the policy that they brought in, they said everybody has to request for an accommodation regardless. And so I looked at it kind of like, okay, well, I guess I'll send in an accommodation request, even though I already have the end result, which is a telework agreement. I already have it. So it should be pretty much easy because, well, they want something for their paperwork and paper trail. So the way I looked at it is, okay, so they said, are you vaccinated? 1, yes. 2, no. So I added a third position, like 3. Basically, my rights are protected under Privacy Act and a few other legislation that I've included in there. And even in the Canada Labor Code, there's a section that says that there shall be no medical, basically, people will not make a medical policy or something like that. I forget the term exactly, but we could go that later on. But so essentially, I basically said what I'll do based on the Canadian Human Rights Act, I'll apply for an accommodation based on genetic characteristics, because in there it says that nobody shall be subject to genetic tests or to disclose their genetic information. And the way I looked at it, mRNA vaccine technology is considered an RNA and an mRNA, and from what I gathered, it was considered genetic information that was at play, which would tell either yes or no that you can make the specific antibodies or whatnot. And then the other one was perceived disability. Basically, my argument was saying that the government, like the employer, essentially, if I don't disclose my status, essentially, it says that you will be considered as unvaccinated, whether you are vaccinated or not. So I made the genetic characteristics grounds of discrimination, as well as the perceived disability grounds of discrimination on my accommodation request.
I got it. So that was in October 21 when you submitted your request to continue working remotely, essentially.
Yes. So for them, they had to do nothing because all my gear, I already had the home office set up over a year and a half. So it's not like they would cost them money. Like, in fact, for them, they would have to go out of their way in order to place me on leave without pay, as opposed to just accept and move on, essentially.
Okay, so and then you were waiting for their response until January, I guess.
Yeah, so
2022.
In the policy, they have to give us a response by November 15th. I applied, so I sent my information on October 29th, I think it was the deadline. And in there, again, I did an amendment, just like if you buy a house, if you're not happy with a condition, you scratch it out and then you modify it. And it's basically a counter offer. So that's kind of, that's what I did. And I submitted it, signed it, and they had it. But I think they didn't know really what to do with it because I haven't heard anything back from it. And for a while, and they wanted to come back and place me on leave without pay, but they say, oh, because you have not sent an accommodation request. And I'm like, hold on, I do have an accommodation request. Here you go. It was sent on this day. Oh, okay. Let us get back to LR, and then let's get back to you. And then there's a lot of that happening until finally in 2022, January, I think is the 24th was the date where they finally placed me on leave without pay officially.
Yeah, and I looked at your winning case where you were able to claim back your employment insurance money. So you found essentially that they even didn't follow their own procedures. Like they should have given you time after letting you know that your submission was not approved. They should have allowed you 2 weeks to comply, right? And they didn't allow you those 2 weeks, and just 3 days later, they removed you from the payment.
Yes, so later on, when that was happening, when I was placed on leave without pay, I immediately started with a grievance process, and I was very busy with this. And then later on, I think around April, late April or May, I found out that, hey, you can place an EI claim for employment insurance. And then I didn't know about that because I didn't lose my job, right? I was still employed. I was just placed on leave without pay. So there's two things that I need to demonstrate for my Social Security Tribunal case. It was antedate. The first one was to justify why am I so late in applying, because I think from memory, again, that's far. I think you have 30 days to make an application. And if you pass the 30 days, then you have to do what they call an antedate. So there was the antedate one, and then also because they had refused to give me the EI because in there it said you were terminated due to your misconduct. And in fact, so when we finally got to the recording, the tribunal, in their decision, they found out there was no misconduct because I did try to apply for an accommodation within the time frame, and I did try to request, like I applied for the accommodation. I did request for them to accommodate me, and the fact that they didn't do that. So in the decision, it talks about two things. It talks about how I tried to apply, and also on the technical. So on the merit is I tried to demonstrate, so I was doing it in good faith. And then on the technicality is that even though I didn't get it, they should have given me at least 2 weeks. So there's two angles from there. So that, I think it's in paragraph 51 where it talks about that.
Yeah, I'm just putting it on the screen, and anyone who is interested can read for themselves. Now, I got it, how it works here. Indeed, the employee didn't follow the rules essentially. So you found that, and you were able to appeal the decision of employment insurance to deny you any benefits.
Yeah, and
Now,
if you
can you tell?
51 paragraph, it says in this case, there's no indication that the appellant deliberately violated the employer's policy before he was suspended. Up to that point, the appellant had followed the steps in the policy to apply for an exemption and had supplied his manager with a reason for that request in accordance with the policy. This tells me the appellant attempted to comply with the policy. So again, because the commission, like when you first ask, like the Social Security Tribunal is basically the fifth area. Like you apply for EI, you get denied. You appeal that, you get denied. Then you go to the commission, general, I guess the general division, I guess, and then you appeal that, and then finally when you go to the Tribunal, Social Security, that's basically the fifth level. So I had to have them say no, 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 and then finally if somebody listened to me and then they said yes.
Okay. Now let's move on to your next court cases. I'm putting on a screen here the picture which you've shown to me. Can you tell us what you have done and where you are right now?
Okay, so to rewind back, so as the time I was doing the Social Security Tribunal, so throughout that period, I also filed a grievance originally with my union PSAC to say, hey, my employer basically denied me work accommodation, and I would like to make a grievance for discrimination on the grounds of genetic characteristics and perceived disability. And then the union essentially basically said, well, the fact that you already teleworked, we can take a grievance on that. However, we cannot do the genetic characteristics because from their interpretation, they were using a narrow definition. And the law came in 2017, and they said that essentially there's not enough case precedent. However, if you feel that the discrimination occurred like that, we recommend that basically you contact the Canadian Human Rights Commission, which I did. I filed a complaint. And then over there at the Canadian Human Rights Commission, they also used the narrow definition of genetic test, and then they incorrectly made the wrong interpretation of that and basically said your argument is there's no case here, your complaint is